So welcome everyone to the 17th annual Victor T. Schaub Memorial Lecture on Local Politics. This annual lecture is hosted by the Department of Politics at HSU and honors Victor Schaub, an Arcata civil attorney and professional mediator who served 2 terms on the Arcata City Council and as mayor from 1990 to 95. He died in 2004, and this was established as a way to honor his memory. I am Stephanie Burkhalter, professor and department chair for the Department of Politics, and the event tonight is Arcata General Plan Update, Planning for the Future, Engaging Citizens in the Process. And I'm pleased to welcome this evening David Loya, the Arcata Director of Community Development, and Dilo Freitas, Arcata City Planner. For those of you who don't know, the Arcata General Plan will help shape how the city of Arcata will look, function, provide services, and manage resources for the next 20 years. And obviously the county is having had not been able to update its plan. So I'm really hoping that Arcata can provide a model for the rest of us. We'll have time for Q&A at the end of the talk and also sort of midway. And if it's just a few of us, obviously you can raise your hand. But I will be monitoring the chat for questions as well. And with that, I will hand it over to our guest this evening. Thank you so much for being here.
Hey, great. Yeah, I'm gonna just share my screen really quick since I have the presentation here. Okay, can you guys all see my screen? Yes, okay. So, first of all, we just want to say welcome and thank you all for being here. It's Earth Day and 420, and it's been a very hard year. And the fact that anybody is here is deeply appreciated. And we thank you for being active and curious about what we're doing here at City Hall. So I am Dilo Freitas. As Stephanie said, I am a planner. And what a planner does at the city is mostly implement regulations, but sometimes we also get to make new regulations, which is what we're doing through this general plan update, which is an exciting and also very challenging process. And I'm here with David as well, my boss, and I'll turn it over to let him introduce himself.
Thanks, Dilo. Yeah, I guess, I'm David Loya. I'm the Director of Community Development. And, I guess we have kind of three themes that I'd like to kind of point to as we walk through our discussion tonight. One is that this is important work. This is really important work, and I'm pleased and proud and honored to be part of this team that, Dilo is also a part of. But you're also a part of this team, you and the rest of the community that is participating in this important work. It's going to shape the way that Arcata looks, over the next 20 years. And hopefully it, casts a new light on policies that we've implemented in the past and does a better job of creating policy that's more equitable. The second theme is that, policy is way cooler than you think. I know that the only reason why there are fewer than 10 people here is because there was a screw up in the link, and not because people think that policy isn't cool, because it's way cooler than you think.
And we're not biased.
And then the third, and we're not biased at all. The third point is that, your voice is important. The participation, this is in part, a lecture series that we're pleased to be a part of, but this is also in part, a new way for us to engage the public, to try and reach new people that traditionally haven't been involved in the discussion about policy development before. And so, your voice is important is a third theme. I am not, quote unquote, native to the area. I came up here 20 plus years ago, getting closer to 26 now for HSU. I moved up here to get my bachelor's degree and then got a master's in biology. And so, this is a wonderful place. I'm very tied to it and proud and pleased to call it home. I'm looking forward to talking to you a little bit more about our general plan. Advance the slide.
Yeah, so just to run through a little bit about what we're going to talk about, and David kind of went over this already, but he's going to start us out with some sort of context setting the policy work that we're working on and how it relates to the environment, since it's Earth Day. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about what a general plan actually is, how we implement it, and why, and how it affects you, as well as some engagement themes to date from the visioning that we have been undertaking in the past few months. We were planning to do some meeting SIFT polling. We may or may not do that. We may just open it up for a small group discussion. So we'll play that one by ear. But if we do decide to do the polling, that happens on your phone or your laptop. So have your device ready. You'll just have to put in a link and a passcode and we can poll together. And we also will leave some time for Q&A if you guys want to discuss any particular topics with us. So turning it back over to David, set the scene for us. Oh, David, you're muted.
All right, 5 points for me. I just wanted to start out, kind of recognizing, in honor of Earth Day, kind of some of the themes, that bring us here. And as, as we're going through this sort of super high level first part, I guess what I'd like to ask you to do is to think about the, what environmental topics are important to you? What motivates you? What ethic do you bring to the table that motivates you to, get through your day, or the kinds of things that are important to you as you think about where this world is at and how fragile it is. This is an interesting picture. It's from the 1969 moon landing. First time the Earth was photographed from the moon, obviously, and gives you a sense for how fragile the planet really is. And so, can you go to the next slide, please? And so, really, the concepts embodied in the Earth Day, the purpose for Earth Day, and the conservation movement that really started in the 60s and 70s. The way that we've embodied this in Arcata over the past 20 years has really been about conserving these green areas around us. This is a view of northern Humboldt Bay, or Arcata Bay as it's known, with Arcata, all the gray stuff sort of just north of the bay there. Is the built environment, obviously the hill slopes to the east and the bottomlands to the west. Our general plan, our existing general plan, the policy that's been put in place, has really focused on developing within our boundaries, developing sustainably, and retaining those lands that are outside of our boundaries and conserving them. Can you go to the next slide? And obviously, when you zoom into the level of the actual cityscape, it's a little bit shocking. This is a very gray area right here. This, the gray is built environment. It's roads, it's buildings, et cetera, et cetera. And if you look throughout Arcata, we do have some, we have some exposed creeks, but most of our creeks are actually underground. We have a very urbanized, micro-sized, but very urbanized environment here. And it's just an interesting perspective because many of us come to the North Coast, based on some of these environmental ethics that drew us here in the first place, drew us to the natural beauty, the opportunities for, hiking and sunshine and whatnot. Next slide. And so it's sort of the, the arc of history that, has brought us to this place where we're facing these existential crises associated with climate change and, sea level rise, fire return intervals, heat islands, places that were habitable in the future becoming less habitable and eventually will become uninhabitable if we don't do something to course correct. It's one of the things that is driving our current planning, thinking is how do we accommodate the future? How do we accommodate climate refugees that are going to be coming to places like the North Coast where we're not going to have these heat impacts, we're not going to have the fire impacts, we're going to definitely have to deal with sea level rise, but this is going to be a climate refuge in the future. we're already seeing people who have, fled the Bay Area. Previously, they were economic refugees, and now we're starting to see COVID refugees. And so when we go out on our front porch, or as we walk around the streets of Arcata and we look around, as we look at this landscape level view, and we think of ourselves as this conservation-minded community, we have to grapple with how are we going to plan for the growth that will inevitably come. So next slide, please. So I think from the work that we've been doing over the past couple of years, trying to think about how do we accommodate this growth, up in the top corner here with the house, this reflects how much housing we produced over the past several cycles from 2003 to current, comparing the amount of housing that the state said we should be producing versus the amount we've actually produced. We're at just under 3/4, about 66%. And so we haven't produced enough housing. Well, what happens when you don't produce enough housing is down in the lower corner there. Over time, that resource gets more and more expensive. And so as the resource gets more expensive, it's harder for folks to attain. And so we have a couple of different options. One, we can infill. We can take these sites that are internal to the city and really densify them. Two, we could decide to annex into new lands, go out into the green fields. Now that's going to run counter to the conservation ethic that we've committed to, but we could decide to go that route, and certainly it's up to us as a community to decide. Or I think this is a false alternative. We could say no, we're not going to do anything. We're going to do nothing. We're going to keep things just the way we like the way they are right now, because this is the way we like them. And why should we have to plan for new people? We're already happy here. But again, reflecting back, I consider this my home. I've been here 25 years, let's say. I'm sure you all consider this your home. And one of the questions I like to ask is, when did we become community members? When did we become able to say we should be allowed, but future people should not? And ultimately, we will get economically displaced because of this lower left-hand graphic anyway. Ultimately, the people will come. They're going to find this as a nice climate refuge, and they're going to continue to come. They're going to bring big money from elsewhere, and we will be economically pressed out. So I think it's a better option to plan for this in advance. So again, this is important work we're doing. We're going to start talking about, how the general plan relates to, projects on the ground. Next slide. And this is important. This policy work is really cool. And so as you have been thinking about this, if you want to, you can pop in the chat, what environmental topic is most important to you? What drives you to this, to these thoughts and ideas? What would drive you to participate? Because what we'd like to do by the end of this talk is to entice you to not only work with us today on this important work, but to come back again and engage with us as we go through the very specific elements of the general plan. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Dilo. Feel free to type into the chat what environmental topic is the most important to you, and we'll use that to help shape some of the conversation later.
Thanks, David. Yeah. Stephanie, are we seeing any answers in the chat yet? I'd love to highlight some of them if we are seeing anybody put anything in.
Not yet. I was just thinking myself, like, there we go. Alternative transportation infrastructure.
Nice, good one.
I think I would have said pollution, probably, or emissions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, well, yeah, please put some thoughts in there, no bad answers, and it really does help us to capture that feedback and understand what the priorities are from people like you. So moving forward, feel free to keep dropping answers in there as I keep talking. So a general plan is more than just a legal document, a regulatory document. It is basically a vehicle for a future growth vision for a community. So when we talk about how are we going to see Arcata grow and change into the future, the general plan is really where that vision is housed. And the community has a really, really important opportunity when you update the general plan to provide comment to the city about what they want the priorities to be, about how and where we continue to grow and develop the city. So it really should reflect the community priorities and values as it shapes the future. And without getting feedback, we can't do that. We can't make sure that we're making a representative document. So I wanted to provide a couple of different ways to think about, what is a general plan in the context of our sort of regulatory framework? How does it impact what the city does? So the general plan is sort of in the middle of this process sandwich, you could say. The general plan rests on the foundational direction, which is the community vision, which should lay out values and priorities that we can try and build consensus around. And then the general plan sort of houses that vision and leads to regulations that we implement and vet projects against when projects come to the fore. So policy, in a way, is sort of like the manifestation of the vision, and projects need to align with it. And I understand this is a very abstract pyramid, so I'm going to give a more concrete example. So this paragraph here at the bottom left-hand part of the screen is taken from our current vision statement that was drafted in the year 2000. It's a 2-page document. We have it translated into Spanish and available in English on the city's website, and I would definitely recommend that you check it out and see if you think it represents the vision that you have for this community. But so this is taken verbatim from our existing vision statement, and it says, we move forward. In Arcata, public and private transportation come in a variety of forms, and we seek out and use the least polluting, most efficient methods. People come first. Bikes, cars, trucks, and transit vehicles share the road with us. Bikeways and pedestrian paths connect all parts of the city. And this one part of our vision statement, the vision that we have for our community, is translated into the transportation element of the general plan. And an element is basically referring to a topic that California law requires to be covered in a general plan. And that element contains a body of policy, including this policy here, transportation element policy TA. And this policy, although it seems pretty abstract, has specific direction for the city to maintain railroad right-of-way to the point feasible. And it has led pretty much directly to city projects like the Annie and Mary Trail Connectivity Project, which is now an underway funded project, partnership with the county, where we are connecting parts of the city based on this policy that is based in this transportation element of our general plan, which is built on this element of our community vision. And so I was saying that the transportation element is a required element of the general plan. Here are all the required elements, and these 6 are ones that we are going to be updating as part of this general plan update. And it's been 20 years since we did this. A lot has changed in our community, in the state, in the world. And I wanted to really quickly just focus on land use. I have a couple of examples here, and this kind of gets into this is maybe particularly for Ben Graham, our attendee, who is a psychology professor. There's sort of a psychological element to the 2 sides of decision making, one being the policy crafting and the other being the actual vetting of a specific project when it comes before the city. So an example of why land use is so important is this project in the city, the Isaacson's project, also called Sorrel Place. This project, which is a very dense project that doesn't have a lot of parking right off the plaza, is a high density downtown project built on existing city policy in the land use element and the housing element and the circulation element that basically created a pathway for this project to be approved. Similarly, this project, which is not in the city, but it's in the county of Humboldt, but has been definitely making some waves lately, is a large cannabis project that is built on the existing allowed land use for that parcel, which makes it significantly easier to move forward with a project like this. And that's based on the land use that was identified in the county general plan. So without this pre-existing policy work, people wouldn't be able to come forward with this kind of project and have it approved. But often, until the actual project is brought forward, people don't know how to engage, and they aren't as motivated to engage until it really turns into reality. So again, projects are sort of the peak of this pyramid. That's where all of this manifests into reality and becomes much less abstract and much more challenging for people to navigate. But what we're talking about now is the visioning. So even though it seems so abstract, it really can build a framework that will shape the development reality for years and years to come. And it's really important to get involved at the beginning and at the end, even if it doesn't seem as important or as motivating when it isn't an actual project down the street from your house. So the lesson here, is that both sides are important. When you have your opportunity to comment on a project and give your opinion to the decision makers, that is very important. And it's, your right as a citizen in a democracy, but also being part of the policy drafting and reviewing it and taking part at the beginning of that process is also so important. And that's what we are hoping to motivate you to do today. So hopefully that makes sense. And I've convinced all of you to get engaged in the work that we are doing. And David, if you have any kind of additional thoughts on that too, this is when we're going to be turning it over for questions.
Yeah, no, I don't have anything to add to that. Does anybody have any questions or thoughts, ideas at this point? Hopes, dreams, desires?
I had a question about where are you in the process? What have you done so far and where are you going? What's the next step?
That's a great segue into the next segment.
Yeah, maybe I'll just explain by presenting to you, if that works for you. Okay, so what I'm going to transition to now is exactly what Stephanie is curious to learn about. What have we done so far? How far down this pathway of visioning have we come? So I'm going to very, very high level run you through some of the feedback we've received to date. We've done 2 visioning sessions, and we've also presented to the HSU Associated Student Board. But if you want to dig into any of this in more detail, you can go to the city's website, to this page, the Strategic and Field Redevelopment Program webpage, and we have full recordings of the meetings and the discussions and really detailed notes. So if this is just really exciting to you, feel free to follow up, and there's a lot more information on the website. So we have had 2 visioning meetings to date, one at the end of December and then one in February as well. And at our December meeting, we were not really looking for any particular outcome. We didn't have a particular structure. It was mostly a listening session where people could come to us and just share what their main points of concern and pride were about their city at the end of a very, very difficult year. So we started with some polling, and a lot of these polling questions will be coming back to you if you would like to do polling as part of this process. So when we asked, how do you envision Arcata in 2021 and beyond, community-oriented, equitable, and inclusive definitely rose to the top, with a lot of these other answers lagging pretty far behind, but sustainability and environmental justice were also close to the top. We also asked, as our community grows, what is most important to consider in the planning? Climate action and resilience, and a mix of housing types, better walking and biking options were some of the main points of feedback that we received at this meeting. And the February visioning notes I don't have those in here, but the results were very similar in terms of the high level results. We also asked a couple of word cloud questions to kind of give people an opportunity for free answers instead of just multiple choice. And we asked, what makes the city of Arcata special, to try and really wrap our brains around what are people wanting to protect, what do they want to celebrate, how can we use policy to support and nurture those features of the community. So people came up, HSU came up, of course, progressivism, variety, hippies, walkability. And when we did the word cloud, the word community came to the fore as the most important thing for the representatives of that meeting. And so at our follow-up meeting, we asked, well, what does community mean to you? It is obviously so important to people in Arcata, but how are you defining it? You know, what does that actually mean, and how can we work to protect that definition? And this one was a little bit harder to parse out, but definitely, again, it came down to inclusivity, safety, family, neighbors, really the connections between people in Arcata. And finally, when we went and did a very similar presentation to the one this evening for the HSU Associated Student Board, similar results came out: affordability, community-oriented, equitable and inclusive, sustainability. But what was most interesting to me is the result we got from the board on what was most important to consider in planning. A mix of housing types and affordability was way, way, way off the charts in terms of the most important feature for the students. And these were students who were representing other students as well. So we really appreciated their willingness to share their answers with us. And we're hoping to build on that with more HSU students at this lecture and beyond as well. So here are some of the main themes that we're pulling out from this work. And some of these things are definitely covered in our existing general plan, our existing vision statement, but there are things that we really need to pay closer attention to and build on as well. Some of them are definitely related to the environment. I think that climate change and climate resiliency came out as a huge, huge theme for the participants that we've talked to so far. Sustainability and environmental justice have also definitely been main themes, as well as racial equity and community connections. And finally, available and affordable housing continues to be a huge theme, and not a surprise to anybody, but we need to continue to think about how can we provide housing in a way that is environmentally responsible and equitable. So that's where we're at so far. We plan to dig into more specific topics over the next 6 months. But now we're on to the really hard part, which is connecting all the dots. We've heard all of these themes, we've asked all of these questions, but how are we going to actually apply those in practice? How are we going to take all of this feedback and integrate it into our policy and into our regulations? So when projects come to us, we know what to pay more attention to and what to continue to encourage. And that is probably the hardest part of this process, and it's also the most important, and it requires us to work with the community, and we're excited to continue to do so. So that is the answer to Stephanie's question, basically. And we do have some polling as well after, David gives his thoughts on this final topic.
Yeah, let's go ahead and jump into the polling.
Okay, so we don't have a big group, but we're going to try and subject you to polling anyway. So let's see if we can make this happen. So if you are able to, don't feel bad if you are not able to figure out the technology, but it should be pretty straightforward. Take out your smartphone or go onto your laptop, type in sit.ly and enter the participant code 4LT6. I'm going to give everybody 2 minutes to log on and connect their devices. And we have, I believe, 6 questions for you tonight. A lot of them are the same questions that we've already asked in some of our visioning sessions.
Hey, is it Dilo?
Yeah, that's
okay.
it. Yeah.
If I could just ask a quick, I'm so sorry, I got called away. Just real quickly, I saw it looked like it was at the tail end of the student survey that had gone around, but you also surveyed community members, right? It was a survey, same questions to both students and non-students. Okay.
Correct.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. So we
wanted to make the point too that the students are community members.
Absolutely. Yes,
And
absolutely.
we reflect them in this process, and in the same way that we reflect community members. And in fact, I think that's one of the reasons that we're excited about speaking to students and to folks at HSU is that many folks come to HSU and they want to stay in the community. They want to become long-term community members. In my opinion, and the way that we're approaching this work, the day that a person gets here, they're a community member. They're eligible to weigh in just the same as someone who's been here for 20 years. There's nothing that sort of smacks of privilege more than having someone walk up to the podium to speak to the decision maker and say, "My name's David Loya, and I've lived here for 25 years, so my voice matters more than someone who's lived here for less."
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's one of the things that we're trying to break down with this this work. Again, getting back to the theme that your voice is important. Your voice is just as important as a person who's lived here their entire lives, 50 years or 10. And so we want to really make sure that we can break down that town-gown divide in particular. And here, how do we make this the kind of community that is inviting and welcoming to HSU students?
Well, thanks.
Sorry for that little tirade.
I know we talk about this a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, I see 4 devices connected. I think we should go ahead and roll the poll. So first question, pretty straightforward. Have you attended a city meeting on the info program or the general plan before tonight? Looks like we have 5 inputs, and we have 1 person saying yes and 4 saying no. Okay, so we also just wanted to ask a couple of questions about engaging in city processes too. So the first question is, do you personally feel prepared to meaningfully engage in and influence our local decisions? Like, do you have the tools at your disposal to engage in policy updates? Do you feel like you have those skills and that knowledge? We're seeing a somewhat prepared and a very prepared. Very nice. Glad that people are feeling relatively prepared. I guess we have probably a sample size of pretty engaged people, which is good. Okay, so next question. What could help make you or other students more prepared to engage in the work that we're doing? And this is a short answer question. No, multiple choice, whatever answer you have. We just want to have people give a little bit of feedback here. Regular updates through media, that's a good one. Instagram and press releases and so forth. I'm going to make us stay on this until we get at least 3 responses, so don't be shy. I think students not versed in planning topics are intimidated by the process. That's a very good point. In fact, I'm sometimes intimidated by the process, and I do this for a living. They literally pay me to do this. More focus on local government and roles of public on campus and through the city. Yep. Iterative deliberations where new and relevant information is shared so we can think about the issues. It's a really good one. Okay. So I'm gonna just explain the next question. So if anybody's furiously typing, they have an extra 2 seconds. So these next couple of questions are the same as the ones we've already asked in other visioning sessions. So what we're trying to do, again, with this like iterative deliberation is ask the same questions and try and see what's rising to the top every time so we can see what people generally agree on. So this first question, as our community grows, what is most important to consider in the planning? So you can see what some of the other visioning meetings, what results they've had, but it was up to you. What would you say? Housing again, always a big one. Yeah, and of these three, better walking and biking, inclusive housing types, climate action, all three of those topics are very intimately connected as well. Okay, I'm assuming that what we're going to get, those are our top three. How do you envision Arcata in 2021 and beyond? Oh, look at it, we're getting some answers. Innovative. That's one that has not come to the top yet. Here we go. Community-oriented and innovative, collaborative, sustainable, racially equitable and inclusive, and environmentally just. Falling behind tonight. Okay. So it looks like we have all four connected devices have put in their input. So going on to the last couple of questions, we want to ask this one again too, because this, keeps coming up as a main theme, and we like to have people define it. What does community in Arcata mean to you? Free answer. Well, this is a hard one. I don't know if anybody's going to bite. There are no wrong answers. Let's see if anybody is interested in giving a definition of what community means to them. Something it's really hard to characterize in a cell phone one-liner. Very true. Good answer. All right. Well,
many people just resorted to kind of a one-word, answer that sort of embodied the core of what they thought of, the first thing that came to their mind. But I want to invite anyone to write an essay and send it to us as well. Justin, you're already getting quadruple credit for this one, so I expect an essay from you.
All right, collaboration, safety, home, honoring diversity, working together through common goals, friendships. All right, thanks guys. Okay, last question. And again, this is a free answer. Feel free to just put in a couple words. It doesn't need to be a fully formed thought, fully formed sentence, no wrong answers. But, just sort of in summary, how would you like to see us try and guide Arcata's growth and change over the next 20 years? Like, what would you like to see done differently? Or is everything already perfect? Stronger transportation options in and out of Humboldt. That was a challenging one. More options and more affordable.
That aren't easily undermined by rock slides and fog.
Right. Again, more transportation options and more diverse and affordable housing, prosperous, nature loving, more equitable, and not a whole lot bigger.
We're going to issue jetpacks to all residents.
Okay, this is our last question.
Were promised before, though. I think jetpacks have been promised in the past. You know, the Jetsons were just completely false advertising.
Yeah. Okay, high density development expansion. All right. Let's see if we can get one more answer before we wrap it up. This is our last question. Not sure if anybody out there is still thinking about this one. I'm just gonna
I suggest we call it.
Yeah, let's call it. Okay, so we're going to wrap that up and close it out. So David, will you run us through some ways to keep track of what we do next?
Yeah, and I'll kind of cut through this a little quickly here. I know everybody's got other things to get onto tonight. But, you know, again, this is important work and we really want you to continue to participate. So we've gotten through some of the community visioning, and that's going to be an ongoing effort. We'll continue to have resources on the Strategic Infill Redevelopment Program page that we talked about earlier. And I'll give you a reminder, Dilo, if you could post those websites in the chat so that folks can download them, that'd be great.
Yeah.
But that's a resource for you. You can go to that resource and learn, you know, what's been done before. There'll be surveys available to you there where you can continue to participate in that. But in the next several months, we'll be addressing a lot of those elements that Dilo talked about, and going through some community outreach and engagement on those. So in 2021, we're going to be pretty much hitting all of the elements that we'll be updating. The community vision statement will be work in progress, but then we'll be moving through the sort of the lower hanging fruit, things that we can revise quickly and get to decision makers with minimal revision first. And then we will take more time that have more analysis for larger updates, like the land use plan, where we're going to have to, you know, figure out how do we cram this infill into a box that feels comfortable for our community. And then through that same time frame, we'll be working on the Gateway Area Plan, which I understand we haven't talked a whole lot about, but that's one of the implementation tools that we'll be using for you know, creating opportunities for densification near the downtown. Next slide. I did want to give you a couple of resources real quick here on our main landing page, cityofarcata.org. Over on the left-hand side, the e-notification sign-up is a great way for you to get notified about events that we're holding. If you click on that link, next slide, it takes you to this page, and you can sign up for the long-range planning AMP. I think that's supposed to be the D got lazy, community visioning. So click on that and you'll get signed up for a listserv that will send you out notifications when we're holding, you know, either, you know, stakeholder meetings or town halls like this, or, you know, formal meetings with the decision makers where you can tell them directly what you think. And yes, stay in touch. I think, did we skip over one?
I might have skipped over this, but yes, we did talk about this.
Okay, yeah, so the, just wanted to remind you of the landing page that we had talked about earlier, the Strategic Infill Redevelopment Program landing page. Okay, the last slide. So if anybody has any questions about, you know, how to participate, feel free to reach out to us directly or sign up with those e-notifications. If you have follow-up you know, conversations you want to have, we're open and available.
And I did drop the links in the chat.
Well, thank you so much. Does anybody have any questions or any areas of discussion? I know we're a small group, but you may have had some questions at this point.
I do have a series of questions if people don't.
Okay. Please, go ahead.
I'd like to preface too that I'm not here for credit. This is purely selfish interests.
Quintuple points.
Policy is way cooler than you think.
So Professor Mara keeps telling me. So one of the first things I guess I want to touch on is I currently am one of the main lobbyists for cycling infrastructure in the local area. And I just want to throw out there that when people click on like your surveys and things about walkability and trail infrastructure, something that I am currently lobbying HSU for is safe and effective storage methods for bicycles on campus. And I think that's something that is missing in Arcata's community as a whole. When you look at like sort of the picture of the square from the aerial view, when you sort of like envision what a like connected community-based city often looks like, what a lot of people, like what comes to mind is a lot of bicycles in a community square, people all along the sidewalks. And what we see in Arcata's, I guess, communal gathering place more often than not is the cars that are lining the different sidewalks, parking spaces in the street. And I think it's something that we need to keep in mind as we are encouraging these new and very exciting trail developments, is that, for instance, if someone's riding their bike from Eureka to Arcata on the soon to be completed Humboldt Bay Trail, we want to make sure that they feel it's safe to stop and enter one of the shops in town and leave their bike somewhere. And I think currently that's lacking.
I think that's a really good point, Justin. The infrastructure you build supports the types of activities that the infrastructure is built for at the end of the day. And so if we want to have alternative transportation, we can want it all day long, but if all we build is roads for single occupancy vehicles, then we're going to have a bunch of single occupancy vehicles and we're going to need places to park them. If instead we build infrastructure that supports alternative modes of transportation or ride sharing, then people will use those modes. And so that's really important feedback. And I think that, the decision makers, have been thinking about those options. And in fact, part of the Arcata Gateway Area Plan purpose is intended to, build into the policy and the implementation those types of amenities. And I think that this is, for alternative transportation, it can be said for many other, topic areas, racial equity, open space preservation, infill development. If you craft really specific policy with very effective implementation, then you actually get those things. If all you do is stop at the goal or the policy, then you never see that built into the environment.
Yeah, and organizations like CRTP will talk about sort of the principle of induced demand. And something that I've talked about with Colin Fisk, CRTP's director, is that there's also the other principle of reduced hesitancy. It's not just new people going out and getting on and choosing, a bicycle to commute to wherever they are going. It's also those people who did that and then decided they can't do that anymore because they had a bad interaction, something was stolen. And that happens a lot more frequently than people tend to consider.
I'm also taking notes, so we can incorporate everybody's comments into the summary of this meeting too. So they're being captured.
I mean, one of the things that Justin is hitting on is this quality of life issue, right? Which is, that we've been talking about resiliency and infill and density, and these are all environmental concepts in planning. But at the end of the day, people want to live in a place where they feel safe and they like it, right? So what kinds of things can you do in the planning process to ensure that those values, without being exclusionary, right? And unjust, how do those kinds of values, it's kind of tough to balance everything.
It is tough to balance everything. And, a good example, I guess I would point to is that, when we are looking for infill examples, we're going to have to look to larger cities. You look to San Francisco, they've, all there is infill. And, they have very large buildings, but they also have lots of public open spaces and very large rights of way to support all of that infrastructure. By contrast, Arcata has, 50-foot right of way, not 150-foot right of way to play with. And so how do you build into that all of the infrastructure that's necessary to support those quality of life, and you don't get just a stack of rats in boxes, right? It's something that we do need to pay close attention to, and I think that those counterbalancing policies, one of the things that we're talking about again in the Arcata Gateway area is how do groups of properties, combine together maybe to provide shared parking? How do groups of properties or public amenities get shared onto private space to try and expand that area? So you may be able to go higher, but in order to go higher, you have to set back farther and then donate that setback. It's not, it's now got a public easement on it so that we can, accommodate those quality of life bits and pieces. There's definitely, a lot to balance. And I think that, we have, an opportunity in some of our, old industrial, there's a large area that was dedicated to timber production in the city of Arcata, that we have an opportunity now to fully convert and, reimagine, re-envision. A lot of cities, in order to do that, they have to go outside their boundaries. They have to, greenfield expand to do. And so it's definitely a balance. I think it's something that we need to pay attention to. The end goal has to be a high density development, but the end goal has to be, quality of life with, a mix of amenities and opportunities.
Yeah, I have this has been really cool and really neat to see. One of the things that got Stephanie and I talking is that I'm interested in some of these deliberative structures. So this being kind of an example of how you solicit feedback from people, and there's so many different ways. That broad umbrella of deliberative democracy. One thing that I've been kind of zoning in on is citizens' assemblies. Citizens in the broadest sense of the term, but these sort of structures where specific decisions are being made. Not so much a general advisory by whoever shows up and wants to take part, but rather two features. One, a bit more specific on a problem that urban planners or the city council or others have identified, and then a deliberative process that takes place over time where a neutral advisory board just determines what information is given to the people who take part. And then specifically a full effort to get a random sample of the population. So, through incentives and, removing barriers, like really inviting a random sample of people. And the outcomes are really interesting. You may have heard of these things. I'm not sure, but Ireland has used them. Iceland, Canada, Australia. There's been a long history there, and those structures seem interesting. But when I look at the pyramid, this is really interesting and cool to look at. I can see how there's kind of at the principal stage of what are people's main concerns, and then how do you direct that? And given all the knowledge and all the different voices that you have to balance in an urban planning process. It's not necessarily the time for a specific decision. Okay, that is to say, my question's kind of embedded in, do you see specific things, and perhaps the timber land that you mentioned is one, but do you see specific problems where a citizen's mechanism like that might be useful to you and to the city?
Yeah, I think those are really interesting concepts and constructs, ways to approach that decision-making process. And we've sort of adopted this structure for public engagement that, on one end of the spectrum, there's sort of the inform, the government is taking this action, we're letting you know. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there's really collaborative engagement and empowering people to create the decisions. Obviously, on the empower end of the spectrum, there's a lot more, which I would consider this approach you're describing as falling into that category. There's a lot more effort and energy that needs to be expended to attain that level of effort. And so we do have, a couple of areas where, we're really trying to dig deeper. Racial equity and social justice is one area where we're trying to, dig as deep as we possibly can into the engagement, ensure that we've involved people in that decision-making process. But I'll just be frank, there's a lot of the policy work that we're doing right now that it's 20 years old and it's still fresh. We keep hearing the same kinds of ideas come forward, and there are new people and they have the same kinds of ideas. And so we're taking that as an affirmation that we're still on the right track. And while I think there would be a lot of people who'd be really interested in engaging in that policy to that depth, we frankly don't have the time, energy, or money to engage to that depth on every topic. And so we really have a thoughtful strategy that we've developed to try and ensure that where it really counts and where it really matters, we're taking a deep dive. We don't have a structure exactly what you're describing, but if you want to volunteer to help us do that, we've got applications.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, yeah, and quite seriously, it's like if it's a small project with a specific end, I mean, definitely, I've envisioned it as sort of this thing where I could bring graduate students who'd be very, very interested and on board in supporting your work and kind of create those structures. It's an idea in the incubation stage. I've been kind of talking to folks. But if that's something that could bring resources to specific corners of your processes, I'd definitely love to speak further on that. It'd be cool. Yeah, and I really appreciate the work.
Yeah, no, we would too. Just before the pandemic hit, we were planning a deliberative forum with Stephanie and Josh to try and bring this concept forward as a deliberative forum. And so, no, I know I was being a little bit glib at the end of my statement there, but we really are very interested in pursuing that. And there's a lot of this work. I mean, we're on a timeline for getting this work done. But in a lot of ways, we can't view the general plan policy development in this phase as the end goal. We have to view this as the springboard that's going to create structures that will help us to continue to refine this over the next 20 years. So,
great, thanks.
There's still time.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. That's really amazing. I'm in this book circle right now, and we're talking about indigenizing and decolonizing. And some issues have come up about Arcadas and land use in collaboration with the local Wiyot peoples. Is there any plan to engage with the Wiyot or others who may want to be important and consulted as decision makers in this planning process? Because what was bringing up with Ben is like, yes, it's great to have randomly selected citizens because then you get a representative sample, right, of opinion. But it's also important to consult with traditional stakeholders and make sure that they are heard and their voices is heard too. So just asking.
We don't right now have a randomization. We have more of a targeted approach, and our targets are for folks that are traditionally marginalized. The way that decisions are typically made, you hold a hearing, each person gets 3 minutes to speak. That's their time frame. The decision makers make a decision based on some stilted deliberations within the parameters that they're allowed based on the Brown Act. And then a decision is made, it's rendered, and you move forward. And what we've identified is that a lot of the decision-making process in many communities, this isn't just this isn't a fault of Arcata alone, but many communities structure their outreach and engagement, even those that go beyond that, maybe have town halls. It winds up catering to a very small portion of the population. And so there's a huge segment of the population, and it breaks along economic lines, it breaks along racial lines, and it breaks along educational lines. And those people, basically what you're saying with that system is that those people don't matter, that the opinions, the experiences, the input of those people doesn't matter. And so we've created a system that is intentionally trying to, and not just trying, it is intentionally achieving deep targeting into communities that are historically marginalized in these processes. Which again is part of the reason why we're making the effort to come and speak to students, and would like to build on that and ensure that we have broader access to students, and the students have broader access to us. So yeah, I do specifically to the WIAT. Yes, we are in regular communications with the tribal historic preservation officers, and are in the process of trying to develop a basically a racial equity policy advisory group, and the WIAT will be invited to attend that as well, to be participants in that.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? Want to wrap it up?
Has the city of Arcata considered sort of aiding in like the facilitation of a creation of like a student representative group of, for instance, I'm part of the ESM planning and policy major here at HSU, where a lot of times students are intimidated to meet planners, or don't know what to ask, versus sort of creating some sort of environment with their fellow students where there could be a committee of, myself and other students who hold a meeting like this where we are the hosts and maybe you guys are invited guests at periodical interview or, times, and sort of that way there's more of a sense of preparation. I feel like if there's just an invitation to a discussion about what's going forward in the general plan, a lot of students are going to feel not confident that they're able to bring any concerns to the table without feeling like fools, or not, being able to work through it first in sort of a more method sense.
Yeah, we'd be really interested in that. And then I will say, we build this as like general plan, and maybe that could have been a little off-putting. Most of what we're trying to do with our outreach, most of the messaging is really plain language. Because I agree, and planners are so intimidating. I mean, look at Dilo, like super scary.
I am
planners.
scary. I am the scariest. Everyone's afraid of me.
So we're trying to go, plain language, and really it's like you don't have to be a policy wonk. You don't have to know how to, translate your lived experience into policy. That's our job. What we're trying to do, right now we're actually working on a framework that takes the granular data that we're getting out of public engagement, translating them back up. Dilo talked a little bit about these themes, translating those into themes, taking that, all of the data, compiling it into themes, and then taking the theme and comparing that with existing or proposed policy. And then we find the gaps. Like, is the community generally on board? Does this body of policy we have address the community concern? Do we have conflicting policies that we need to now balance? We'll take that work that we do, taking your lived experience, translating it into the theme and comparing it with the policies, and then reflect that back to you, either through, an engagement like this or a public hearing, so that the decision makers can see like, oh, okay, this is what the community said. This is the, way that our policy addresses it. These are the improvements that we need to make to further refine or better address the concerns in the community. So we would definitely want to have, in general, our engagements be sort of lower key and less intimidating. Like, you don't have to have that knowledge in advance. But we would also jump at the chance to, come speak to student groups in any, forum that feels most appropriate and comfortable, and, of course, respects all the, whatever the rules are that the university has about, those engagements.
I also want to take this opportunity to share the meeting in a box concept, because I feel like that's basically exactly what Justin is describing. So the city's working on this basically way to hold your own visioning meeting, ask the same kinds of questions, but we don't have to be there. We don't have to basically take any part in it. We prepare information for you in advance, videos, and we send you links to the general plan, to the vision statement, to other documents. And then you, or whomever would want to be the facilitator or leader of that group, would invite participants and then facilitate the discussion. We provide, sort of a background on how to facilitate. And then you will work to try and build consensus with your group on their top 3 ideas for what they would like to see for the vision of the community. And then you send that back to us, along with any other relevant details. So I dropped my email in the chat. If you would like to be a team facilitator and do a meeting in a box with your peers, cohort, pod, etc., we would definitely love to send it to you. We are still sort of like in the development stage. Everything is drafted, but we're sending it to our Equity Arcata team leads to kind of be our guinea pigs and work out the kinks. But as soon as that is done, we're going to be releasing it to the broader community, and we're going to be sending it to CRTP, to a variety of community groups, and hopefully also to teachers. We'd love to have this done in classes too. So that, I think, kind of speaks to what you're asking for, is how do we bring this to a larger audience and give people sort of a sense of ownership and agency over the process. So we'd love to have you take part and give us feedback on how it went.
Great. Yeah. Anything to give Judith a little more work and a little more on the plate. Something, just a quick note too, is I really appreciated the emphasis on making sure that appears as sort of simple as possible in terms of language, that people can get a better understanding of what's going on. I will say, though, however, as sort of straightforward as it seems to us and to people sort of out of college, I would say if you went up to a majority of students on campus and asked them about the Arcata general plan, they would have no idea what a general plan is, what it means.
No, we're asking questions like, what kinds of things are important to you? And most students are saying housing is really important. What kind of things about housing are important? Well, I can't find a house in Arcata. Are you finding that, the application fees? So we're asking questions like that. Lived experience type questions that have absolutely nothing to do with the general plan. We do the policy wonk stuff. We translate lived experience into policy and see, are these things matching up or not?
If there's a lesson learned for our flyer development, though, maybe we should just put on there, tell us what you care about.
Yeah.
Specific session for what you care about instead of general plan update. Because, it's not just students. Many community members don't know what that means and don't know what it does.
The City of Arcata Planning Department, what I want you to walk away with the idea is that the City of Arcata Planning Department, Community Development Department, is really about helping you realize your dreams, hopes, and visions.
See, I think policy's cool, so I thought the flyer was not intimidating. That's what. So now we know. I think we have a serious actionable item coming out of this. It's to make it so it's like, what's your vision of the future? Come chat. And then have some structured discussions around that with the information. I love this idea of the meeting in the box, because if the information is already packaged, then we can drop it in our class. We can do a 2-hour class on it, right? And have everybody prepare and actually get something out of it. And
that's what I thought too, Stephanie. I think
it's really cool.
A lot of different points where you could take a usable tool like that. A lot of these tools kind of replicate, but they're just configured slightly differently and all that stuff. So I'd love to see that. I'll send you an email
Yeah,
please,
me too.
everybody email me and I will send it out.
Well, it's almost 6:30, so I want to let everybody go. Thank you so much to our guests. It's been a wonderful time. Yes, we stayed the whole time and we were engaged the whole time. And policy is cool.
Small but mighty.
Yes,
I feel so much cooler than I was when I began.
Exactly. And we'll have the recording, and we will spread the word, and we will collaborate again. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks everybody for coming tonight. We really appreciate it. Talk to everyone
Okay,
soon.
thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.
Right.
Bye.